The manila folder in her hand held the report she refused to sign. 3 weeks of refusal. Today it would cost her the job. Melissa Grant walks into the 41st floor at 7:52 in the morning. Cream blazer, long dark curls loose over her shoulders. She is black, 32, an executive assistant. Nobody on that floor ever wanted to see promoted. Colleagues avoid her eyes at the water dispensers. Diana Whitmore glides past with a cold smile. Marcus Chen lowers his gaze behind silver-framed glasses. And Richard Blake, CFO, navy pinstripe suit and burgundy tie, is already waiting in boardroom A. At 9:03, Richard walks her out of the glass boardroom into the main hall. He gathers 40 people by the copiers. He announces her termination out loud. He says the words, "You never knew your place here." Someone laughs, ashamed. Melissa does not scream. She does not beg. She answers, quiet and steady, "You are making the most expensive mistake of your career. You have no idea who you're humiliating." What none of them know is that Melissa Grant is the secret wife of Kang Min-jae, boss of the Korean Mafia, the man with the black dragon tattoo climbing his neck. And there is a pact between them she has protected for years. But the pact is about to break. And what happens when every phone on that floor rings at the same time? Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Melissa Grant pressed the elevator button on the 41st floor and held the manila folder tighter against her ribs. 7:52 on a Tuesday. The doors slid open onto the glass corridor of Blake, Whitmore, and Chen, and the smell of fresh coffee from the executive kitchen came out to meet her the way it always did, warm and expensive and completely indifferent to what was about to happen inside her. She walked in. The cream blazer sat straight across her shoulders. Under it, the burnt rose silk top with the ruched neckline caught the morning light coming through the panoramic windows and threw it back softer. Her heels struck the floor in a rhythm she had trained for years, not loud, not shy, just measured. The long curls fell past her chest, the small braids at the temples still holding from the mirror, 2 thin chains at her throat, the little open-work heart, the pendant with the stylized letters. She had chosen those on purpose this morning. The letters spelled something only she and one other man in the world knew how to read. The folder was thin, 27 pages. She had counted them again in the taxi. "Big day today, Melissa." Diana Whitmore said it without slowing down, the platinum bob swinging once as she passed. Ivory silk blouse, black pencil skirt, pearl studs, red lipstick, already perfect at 10 to 8. She did not turn her head. She did not smile with her eyes. The words were placed the way a knife is placed on a table before dinner, sharp side up. Melissa nodded once. "Good morning, Diana." Diana kept walking. The word big hung in the corridor for a second longer than it should have. Melissa recognized the shape of it. She had heard that same word from Diana 3 weeks ago, the morning Marcus Chen first slid the report across her desk with 2 fingers and a smile that had nothing to do with kindness. She reached her workstation, not a corner office, a senior analyst's cubicle in the outer ring of the 41st floor, glass on one side, gray fabric partition on the other, framed photograph on the desk, face down since Friday, fountain pen in the leather cup, silk scarf folded across the back of the chair, in case the air conditioning turned brutal in the afternoon, the way it sometimes did. She set the manila folder down. She did not open it. Pearl Whitfield was already at the reception counter across the hall, 24 years old, and trying to look older in a beige blouse and black tailored trousers. She raised her eyes when Melissa passed the desk, then dropped them again to her monitor as if she had been caught reading a private letter. Melissa registered it without letting her face change. Pearl had been polite to her the day before. Now Pearl was pretending to be busy with the visitor log. Interesting. Two junior associates passed the cubicle carrying takeaway cups. Both looked at her, both looked away. Melissa sat. Her computer woke on its own. She entered the password without needing to look at the keys. The inbox loaded. 71 unread messages from overnight, because compliance in Zurich never slept, and she skimmed the subject lines the way a surgeon skims a chart before scrubbing in. Nothing from the auditors. Nothing from Nathan. Nothing from him. She had asked him for silence this week. He had honored it. Then, at 7:58, the top of the inbox refreshed itself, and a new message dropped in, with a soft tone that only Richard Blake's account could produce, because he had paid a consultant to configure it that way. She read the sender line before the subject. Richard Blake, CEO. Subject, Boardroom A. 9 a.m. Please be prompt. 2 sentences in the body. There will be human resources present. Bring the report. She read it twice. She closed the message. She placed her hands flat on the desk, one on either side of the manila folder, and let herself feel the cool wood under her palms for a count of 3. The pen in the leather cup did not tremble. The photograph on the desk stayed face down. The building at that height moved a millimeter in the wind, and she felt it the way a pilot feels turbulence, as information, not as a threat. Luri, human resources present. Bring the report. She almost smiled. She did not. They were going to fire her at 9. She had known it since Friday afternoon, when Marcus Chen had walked past her cubicle a third time in 1 hour without looking at her. She had known it before that, really. Since the morning 3 weeks ago when the report had first appeared on her desk with a yellow tab on page 19 and Marcus's neat blue signature already waiting at the bottom of page 27 for hers to join it. She had refused to sign that morning. She had refused again on Monday of the 2nd week. She had refused on Wednesday of the 3rd week, when Richard himself had called her into his office and used the phrase team player 4 times in 6 minutes. She had gone home that Wednesday night and slept 8 hours. That had told her something about herself she had not known before. Now the folder sat on the desk. The unsigned report. 27 pages that certified a set of numbers that were not, in any recognizable sense of the word, true. Numbers that would let a subsidiary in Singapore report a first-quarter loss as a first-quarter gain in front of a board that was about to vote on a 9-figure acquisition. Numbers that, if she signed, would put her name 3 inches under Marcus Chen's on a document that a federal prosecutor would one day hold up in a hearing room and ask a jury to read out loud. She was not going to sign. She had decided that on the 2nd morning, she had confirmed it every morning since. She had not told her husband. She had not told anyone. She had wanted to see if she could stand this on her own feet, in her own name, with nothing else in the room but her signature, or the absence of it. She was about to find out. The floor around her began to fill. Assistants at the coffee station. A director from the 15th floor who had no reason to be up here today, standing at the water dispenser and pretending to read something on his phone. 2 of the junior analysts from her own team going into the small conference room and closing the door behind them, which they were not supposed to do without booking it. The temperature of the room had not changed. The behavior of the room had. Melissa opened her lower drawer. The photograph, when she turned it to face up on her desk, was of a wooden pier and a strip of gray water and no faces. She had taken it herself, 4 summers ago, off the coast of a small town on the eastern edge of the peninsula, where she had spent a week she was not supposed to remember. She kept the photograph because no one who worked in this building had ever asked her about it. Anyone who asked would have to be told the truth, and she was not ready to tell the truth to anyone in this building, not yet. She put the photograph in her tote bag. She put the fountain pen in beside it, the silk scarf folded twice on top. The manila folder stayed on the desk. At 8:17, an email arrived from Human Resources confirming her attendance at the 9 o'clock meeting. She read the sender line and understood a small, useful thing. The HR partner assigned to this meeting was Kimberly, who had started at the firm 4 months ago and had never once looked Melissa in the eye at a company function. They had chosen Kimberly on purpose. Kimberly would sign whatever was put in front of her. She almost sent a reply. She did not. At 8:24, Marcus Chen walked past her cubicle for the second time that morning. The first time he had been carrying a takeaway cup. This time his hands were empty, and the charcoal gray suit hung a millimeter off his shoulders in a way she recognized from Bored Fridays. He had dressed at 4 in the morning after not enough sleep. The rectangular silver-frame glasses caught the light. He looked at the folder on her desk. He looked at her. She met his eyes. He kept walking. She let out a breath she had not been aware of holding. Nathan Reed had told her once, in a study on the top floor of a house in a private suburb north of the city, that most people confuse the moment of decision with the moment of consequence. The decision, he had said, is quiet, and it happens weeks before anyone else notices. The consequence is loud, and it takes the shape of a room full of people who think they are the ones deciding. Nathan had said this while polishing his gold-rimmed glasses with a white handkerchief, in the tone of a man reading the temperature outside. She had been 28 years old, and she had written the sentence down in her head and never lost it. The decision had been made 3 weeks ago on this desk. The consequence was walking down the corridor toward her right now in the shape of Richard Blake. He came around the corner with the roll of a man who has enjoyed a heavy breakfast and does not care who knows. Navy pinstripe three-piece, pale blue shirt, burgundy silk tie held down by a small gold pin, the thinning silver-gray hair combed sideways in the way that men over 50 stop being able to correct after 8 in the morning. He was carrying a coffee. He was smiling at someone behind him, some remark he had been enjoying since the elevator. He passed her cubicle without turning his head. The smile fell off his face the moment he thought he was out of her sight line. She saw it in the reflection of the glass wall. He was afraid of her. That was the thing she had not expected. She had expected contempt. She had expected the small, hard cruelty that men of his generation used on women who had stopped being useful to them. She had not expected that under it, folded very small and kept out of view, was fear. He was going to fire her at 9 o'clock in front of the whole floor because he was afraid that if he did it privately, in a room with a door and a lawyer, she would say something that could not be taken back. She was going to say it anyway. She checked her watch. 8:31. A slim watch with a slim leather band, the only jewelry on her wrists, apart from the 2 chains at her throat. She stood up. She walked to the small kitchenette at the end of the corridor. She poured herself a glass of water from the filter jug. She drank the whole glass slowly, looking through the panoramic window at the city 41 floors below her, at the roofs and the traffic and the small silver ribbon of the river cutting east through the grid. Somewhere down there, in a building she owned without any of the people on this floor knowing, a driver was starting a car. Somewhere further out, in a house she had not been to in 6 days, a man was drinking coffee out of a cup she had bought him for a birthday and reading the same 3 morning newspapers he had read every morning for as long as she had known him. She had not called him. She had not warned him. She had not asked him to be ready. That had been the pact. He did not interfere at her workplace unless she asked. She wanted to be seen for competence, not for the ring on the finger she never wore into this building. She put the glass down. She walked back to her cubicle. Diana Whitmore was standing at it, one hand resting lightly on the corner of the desk, looking down at the manila folder. "You brought it," Diana said. "I brought it. Signed?" Melissa did not answer. Diana lifted her hand off the desk and adjusted the small gold bracelet on her wrist. The half-smile did not touch her eyes. "It would be easier for everyone, Melissa, including you. I don't think easy is what today is going to be." Diana looked at her for a full second. The pale green eyes did not blink. Something small and unhappy moved behind them, and then it was gone. 9 o'clock, she said. Don't be late. She walked away. Melissa sat down again. The floor around her had gone quiet, in the way floors go quiet when everyone has decided to pretend they are not listening. She could hear the hum of the servers behind the wall. She could hear the small tick of the analog clock above the coffee station that no one but her had bothered to notice was 2 minutes slow. She opened her lower drawer one more time. At the back, behind a stack of old notebooks, there was a small square envelope. She had put it there on Friday, and she had not looked at it since. She took it out now and held it in her lap under the desk, out of sight. She did not open it. She only rested her palm flat on top of it for a count of 3, the way she had rested her palms on the desk earlier. The paper was warm. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of thick cream stock, folded once. On the sheet were 3 sentences written by hand in black ink in a script that most people would have called elegant, and that she had learned to read as something much simpler than that. She did not need to open it. She knew the 3 sentences. She put the envelope back in the drawer. She closed the drawer. Her phone buzzed once on the desk. A calendar reminder. 8:50, 10 minutes. She stood up. She smoothed the cream blazer at the hip. She picked up the manila folder in her left hand and her tote bag in her right, and she stepped out into the corridor. Every head on the floor turned by an inch, then turned back. She walked to boardroom A the long way, past the elevators, past the water dispensers, past the small conference room where the 2 junior analysts were still hiding behind a closed door. She did not hurry. The heels struck the floor at the same measured rhythm she had trained. The curls moved a half beat behind her shoulders. She caught her own reflection once in the glass of a partition and did not look for anything in it. She already knew what she looked like this morning. She reached the door of boardroom A at 8:57. Richard was already inside. Marcus was already inside. Kimberly from HR was already inside. One hand on the tablet in her lap, one foot tapping under the table, in a rhythm that had nothing to do with any music. Diana was arriving behind Melissa now, unhurried, the ivory blouse catching the light. The glass wall of the boardroom faced the main hall. Beyond it, the assistants and the junior associates and the visiting director from the 15th floor were arranging themselves at the water dispensers with a casualness that convinced no one. Someone had already opened the door of the boardroom by 2 inches, so that sound could travel. Melissa noticed the 2-inch gap. She understood the 2-inch gap. She stepped inside. She placed the manila folder on the table in front of the empty chair at the far end, the one they had left for her. She placed her tote bag on the floor beside it. She did not sit. Richard looked up from his phone. The tight sneer that lived at the corners of his mouth pulled into place. Melissa, thank you for joining us. Please sit. She stayed on her feet. Melissa, he said again, softer, the way a man says a word when he is used to being obeyed on the first syllable. She looked at him. She looked at Marcus. She looked at Kimberly, and Kimberly looked at her tablet. I'm listening, Richard. He set his phone down. He smiled the smile that had nothing to do with kindness. He gestured toward the glass wall, and the hall beyond it, and the small gap in the door. Actually, he said, why don't we do this out there? Everyone should hear. He stood up. He walked past her toward the door, and the burgundy tie caught the light, and the small gold pin winked once, and behind her she heard Diana's heels take the first quiet step toward the hall. Melissa picked up the manila folder in her left hand. She followed him out. Richard's shoes struck the hall floor in a rhythm that was not his usual rhythm. It was slower. He wanted the sound. He wanted the assistants at the water dispensers to hear it and turn. They turned. Melissa walked 3 steps behind him with the manila folder in her left hand. She kept her spine straight and her curls loose over her shoulders. she did not hurry to catch up. If he wanted an audience, he would get one at her pace. Diana slipped out of boardroom A and took a position near the copier, arms folded low, chin lifted just enough. It was a rehearsed pose. She had rehearsed it, probably, in her own bathroom mirror before leaving the apartment on the Upper East. Melissa saw it and marked it, the way an auditor marks a line on a page. There were 40 people in the hall now. She counted the way she always counted rooms: corners first, exits second, faces last. 2 associates from tax pretended to fill paper cups they had already filled. A junior from compliance held a manila folder of his own, though nothing in his hands moved. The visiting director from the 15th floor stood at the far wall with a coffee he was not drinking. Pearl Whitfield sat behind the reception desk. Her hands were flat on the wood. Her chest rose and fell too quickly. She had understood, before anyone else, what the geometry of the room meant. Richard turned to face her. He chose the exact spot in front of the water dispenser, where the overhead light was strongest. He wanted the frame. "Everyone, if I could have your attention for a moment." Nobody had been doing anything else. It was theater. He clasped his hands in front of the burgundy silk tie. The gold pin caught the light. He smiled at the ceiling for a half-second, like a man preparing to give a wedding toast he had written on the plane. "I want to keep this brief," he said, "because I believe in transparency." Melissa stopped 4 steps from him and set her weight evenly on both feet. She did not lower the folder. She did not lift it. She held it in the exact place a person holds a folder when a folder is a folder. "As of this morning," Richard said, "Miss Grant will no longer be part of the Blake, Whitmore, and Chen family." He paused for the word family. He always paused for that word. "After careful review with human resources," he continued, "and after a series of internal conversations over the past several weeks, the firm has concluded that the termination is for incompatibility with our values." Somebody near the copier made a small sound that was not a cough. Melissa did not turn to look at who it was. She kept her eyes on Richard. She had spent 3 weeks preparing to keep her eyes on Richard. He was not finished. That was the part he had been rehearsing. "I want to be clear," he said, softer now, almost fatherly, "that this decision was not easy. Melissa has been with us for a long time. She has been competent in her role, diligent in her way. But there is a component to this house that goes beyond competence. There is a fit. There is a culture." He tilted his head. Melissa saw the smile crack at one corner. It was the same crack she had watched in the reflection of the glass earlier, when he had passed her cubicle believing he was outside her field of vision. "You never knew your place here." The hall went quiet in a way that was different from before. He said it again, softer, so the softness would carry farther than a shout. "Did you really think you belonged on this floor?" The junior from compliance looked at his shoes. The tax associate finally set the paper cup down on the machine. Diana's mouth curved. It was small. She did not let it become a laugh. Pearl's fingers pressed harder into the wood of the reception desk. Melissa felt the sentence land where he had aimed it. He had aimed for the part of her that was 26 years old, walking into a job interview in a blazer that did not yet fit at the shoulders. He had aimed for the part of her that had taken the D train to school in a coat she had bought at a thrift store on 125th. He had aimed for the part of a black woman that white men in wingtips have always aimed for, in rooms with too much light and not enough exits. He had aimed well. He had not aimed well enough. She breathed in through her nose. Once. She let the breath fill her diaphragm the way Nathan Reed had taught her to breathe, years ago in a study at the top of a house in a private suburb, high enough to move a full sentence at low volume without a tremor. She waited for the breath to finish traveling, then she opened her mouth. "Are you finished, Richard?" Her voice did not rise. It carried anyway. Richard blinked. He had prepared for tears, or for shouting, or for the classic reach for a phone that would connect her to a lawyer nobody in the room could see. He had not prepared for a question. "I'm finished," he said, because there was no other answer he could give in front of 40 people. "Good." She adjusted the folder to her right hand. It was a small movement. It made the corner of the manila catch the overhead light, and the overhead light was strong. "You're making the most expensive mistake of your career." She did not step forward. "You have no idea who you're humiliating." She let the sentence sit on the tile floor between them. She did not decorate it. She had learned in a study in a suburb that a sentence with no decoration is heavier than a sentence with any. Diana blinked. She had expected the day to end with her hand on the doorknob of an office that was not yet hers but soon would be. She had not expected the sentence. Marcus Chen appeared in the doorway of boardroom A. His rectangular silver frame glasses had slid a quarter-inch down his nose. He did not push them back up. He was looking at Melissa the way a man looks at a report he has just realized he read too fast the first time. Kimberly from HR stood beside him with a folder of her own. Her jaw was tight. She had signed the papers in the taxi on the way in, because Richard's assistant had told her to sign before 9, and she had been in the firm 4 months and had not yet learned to ask which papers. Richard laughed. It was not a real laugh. It was the sound a man makes when he is telling a room a laugh is the correct response. "Melissa," he said, "please don't make this harder than it needs to be." "I'm not making it harder," she said. "I'm telling you what today is." Someone in the hall inhaled and did not exhale. Richard tried to reset. He turned a shoulder to her, addressed the room instead. "I appreciate everyone's patience during a difficult moment. Kimberly will escort Miss Grant to collect her personal items." "I already collected them." The junior from compliance looked up. "Excuse me?" "The box is under my desk," Melissa said. "I packed it before you sent the email. I don't need Kimberly." The line rearranged the room without anyone moving. The tax associate turned her head half an inch. Diana's arms uncrossed and refolded lower, as if her ribs had shrunk one size. The visiting director from the 15th floor set his coffee down on the sill of the tall window and did not pick it up again. Richard breathed twice through his nose. It was the first time in the sequence that his breathing had been visible. "Then let's proceed," he said. He gestured toward the elevators, the way a maitre d' gestures a diner toward the door. She did not move toward the elevators. She turned instead toward her cubicle. She walked the long way, past the copier where Diana had rehearsed the pose, past the water dispensers, where the assistants were now trying to be invisible, past Pearl at reception, whose eyes were shining but had not spilled. She did not walk fast. She did not walk slow. She walked like a woman who owned the carpet under her feet. At her desk, she bent at the knees, not at the waist, and lifted the small cardboard box from the well under the drawer. The framed photograph of the pier was on top. The fountain pen lay against the silk scarf. The scarf was folded in 3. She had folded it that way on Monday night, in her closet, in front of her husband who had watched her hands and had not asked a question. She set the manila folder on top of the box, not inside it. She wanted the room to see it. She walked back the same way she had come. When she passed Marcus in the doorway of boardroom A, she stopped for half a second, no more. "Marcus." He did not answer. He could not. "You put your signature on page 27, 3 weeks ago," she said quietly. "You put it there before mine. That was a mistake." She kept walking. She reached the elevator bank. She set the box on the low console under the button panel. She pressed the down arrow with the knuckle of her index finger, not the pad, because she had a manicure and because she had a habit. The button lit. Behind her, Richard said something to Kimberly about the exit interview form. Kimberly nodded quickly at nothing. Diana approached from the copier. 2 steps. She stopped just outside arm's length. She had the pen from Boardroom A in her right hand. She was tapping it against her thumb. "You made this uglier than it had to be, Melissa." Melissa did not turn. "You made it a performance, Diana. I made it a Tuesday." Diana's tap on the thumb stopped. The elevator light on the wall panel climbed. 36, 37, 38. Pearl stood up behind the reception desk. She had not been asked to stand. She stood anyway. Her hands stayed at her sides. She looked at Melissa, and Melissa, without turning her head, saw her in the polished chrome of the elevator surround. Something moved behind Melissa's ribs. It was not fear. It was the recognition of a witness. She had not asked for one. She had one. The elevator light hit 40. It hit 41. It stayed there. The doors did not open. They should have opened. Richard glanced at the panel. He tried to make the glance casual. It was not casual. Kimberly clutched her folder. Diana's pen resumed its tap. 10 seconds passed. 12. The button was still lit. Melissa looked at the seam between the two doors. She kept her breath even. She did not lift her wrist to check the time, though she wanted to. She knew that a woman about to walk out of a building she owned should never check the time in front of the man who has just told her she never belonged in the building. 15 seconds. The compliance junior turned toward the elevator. He was not sure why. Something in the air had rearranged itself. He was young, and he did not yet have a name for it, but his body had a name for it, and his body had turned him. Marcus took one step forward. His hand went to his pocket. His phone, Melissa realized. He was going to reach for his phone. He never got there. Every phone in the hallway rang at once. Not one after the other. Not a cascade. At once. 40 pockets and 40 desks and 40 hands. The junior from compliance flinched at the vibration in his blazer. The tax associate's landline began to trill on her desk down the corridor. The reception phone on Pearl's desk lit up all 4 lines simultaneously. Kimberly's HR phone rang inside her folder. Diana's rang in her hand. Richard reached for his own phone before he thought about it. His thumb hit the screen before his brain caught up. He put the phone to his ear because that was what a man did when a phone rang. He was a man who did what men did. The voice on the line was calm. It had the small, precise weight of a Korean accent, softened by 20 years in New York boardrooms. It did not sound rushed. It did not sound angry. It said the same sentence into every phone. All directors, managers, and supervisors of this company report immediately to the wife of the boss of the Korean Mafia. Richard's mouth opened once. It did not form a word. Diana's pen fell out of her hand. It struck the tile and rolled. It rolled toward Melissa's shoe and stopped an inch from the toe of the mid-heel pump. Marcus's knees did a thing they had never done before. They did not buckle. They shifted, the way a table shifts when a leg is a quarter-inch short. He put his palm flat against the doorframe of Boardroom A. His silver-frame glasses slid another quarter-inch and stopped at the tip of his nose. Pearl at reception looked down at her lit phone. She did not pick it up. She had understood the sentence in the 2 seconds between the ring and the words, because she had been the one, the day before yesterday, to bring Melissa a cup of tea in a mug that had no logo, and the mug had been engraved on the bottom with 2 initials she had not been able to read. The tax associate lowered her phone very slowly, like she was setting down something breakable. She looked at Melissa. She had been at the firm for 6 years. She had passed Melissa in the hall 1,000 times. She had said good morning 1,000 times. She had never once looked at her the way she was looking at her now. The visiting director from the 15th floor picked his coffee back up. He set it back down. He picked it up. He did not know what to do with his hands. Melissa did not turn. She stood at the elevator with her back to the hallway and her box on the low console and the manila folder still on top of the box, and she watched the number above the doors sit at 41 and not move. The elevator was not late, she knew that now. The elevator had stopped where it was because someone had told it to stop where it was. Behind her, 40 phones had gone silent again. The line had ended. The voice had said what it needed to say, and then it had gone. Nobody in the hall moved. Nobody sat down. Nobody stood up who was not already standing. Richard was still holding his phone to his ear, as if the voice might come back and correct itself. It did not. He lowered the phone in stages. His hand did not shake. His hand did not shake because he was ordering it not to shake, and the effort of the order was visible in his jaw. He did the only thing he could still do. He turned, slowly, toward Melissa. She felt the turn without seeing it. The room, all of it, had turned with him. The elevator arrow ticked once, softly, and the light for the down button went dark, and the light for the up button went on, and the small chime above the door announced an arrival that was not supposed to be an arrival. The doors slid open. She did not step inside. She did not need to. The 4 men who stepped out did not raise their voices. They did not need to raise their voices. They were dressed identically, black on black, and the sound they made in the hall was the sound of expensive leather on polished stone, 4 times, in perfect unison. Behind them came a man in a gray 3-piece suit carrying a thick brown leather briefcase. Behind the man with the briefcase came the 5th man. He wore the black suit. He wore the white shirt. He wore the black silk tie. Melissa did not turn her head to look at him. She did not need to. She had felt the geometry of the room shift again, and she knew the shape of the shift because she had lived inside that shape for 11 years. He stopped 1 step to her right. He set his hand at the small of her back, not to move her, just to say a thing without saying it. His fingers rested there for the length of a breath. Then he lowered his hand and took hers instead. Gently, publicly, in front of every person in the hall. He looked past her, at Richard. His eyes were dark and level and did not blink. "Forgive me for being late, my love." He said it in English so the hall would understand it. "It will not happen again." Diana's pen was still on the tile, an inch from Melissa's shoe. Nobody had picked it up. Nobody was going to. Richard's phone slipped from his fingers. It did not fall all the way to the floor. He caught it against his thigh with a movement that was not a choice, and he held it there, pressed flat against the burgundy silk of the tie, the gold pin above it catching the light for the last time that morning, as a symbol of anything at all. Min-jae did not release her hand. He adjusted it, slightly, the way a man adjusts a ring that has been on his finger for years, and the small movement was the loudest thing in the hall. Melissa felt the pressure of his thumb against the base of hers. It was a signal she knew. 3 years of a private language, spoken in gestures that no one had ever been meant to read, and now the first sentence of that language was being spoken in front of 40 people at 9:08 in the morning. She breathed once. She did not turn her head. The 4 bodyguards had already found their marks. 2 by the elevator bank, 1 by the corridor that led to the executive offices, 1 at the corner where the hall opened toward reception. They moved without seeming to move, the way water finds a shape. Nathan Reed stepped a half pace behind Min-jae and let the briefcase rest against his thigh. The leather was old and the brass corners were dulled from carrying. Melissa had seen that briefcase in a study on the top floor of a suburban house at 28, and she had seen it in a private office in Seoul at 29, and she had seen it in the passenger seat of a car crossing a bridge at 30. It always meant that a decision had already been made. Richard tried to lift his chin. The effort was visible. "Mr. Blake," Nathan said. The voice was mild. "We spoke, briefly, in June of last year. I represented Kang Holdings at the arbitration in London. You may remember." Richard remembered. His pupils betrayed it. "I don't understand what this is," Richard said. He aimed the sentence at the air above Melissa's head because looking at her had become a physical impossibility. "It's Tuesday," Melissa said. Diana laughed. It was involuntary, and it was the wrong kind of laugh, and Diana knew it the instant it left her. She pressed her lips together and dropped her eyes to the floor, to the pen, to the inch of carpet between the pen and the toe of Melissa's shoe. Min-jae looked at Diana. He looked at her for 2 seconds. He said nothing. Diana felt the 2 seconds down the back of her neck and into her calves. When he looked away, she found she had bent her knees a fraction to keep from swaying, and she found she was ashamed of that. Min-jae turned his eyes to Marcus. Marcus was still against the doorframe of boardroom A. His hand had not left the glass. Beads of moisture had gathered at his fingertips where the palm had been pressed for too long. He straightened his glasses with a movement that was meant to look casual and did not. "Mr. Chen," Min-jae said, "I understand you have been asking my wife to sign something for you for the past 3 weeks." The word wife landed in the hall. It landed differently than the phone call had landed. The phone call had come from far away, from a voice with an accent, from a script that had felt for one strange minute like a stunt. The word wife came from the mouth of the man holding her hand, and it settled in the hall like a physical object, and 40 people took a small, involuntary step in their own bodies. Marcus's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "I would like to see the document," Min-jae said. Melissa reached with her free hand into the cardboard box on the elevator console. Her fingers found the folder on top, the manila with the yellow tab at page 19, and the blue signature of Marcus Chen on page 27. She lifted it. She did not look at Marcus. She did not look at Richard. She held the folder out at hip height, and Nathan took it, and Nathan slid it into the briefcase, and the briefcase closed with the small click of an old brass lock. The click was the loudest thing in the hall for the second time in 90 seconds. "Thank you," Min-jae said. To Melissa. Not to Nathan. To Melissa. She nodded once. The chime of another elevator sounded, 3 doors down. Nobody turned. It opened onto no one, and it closed onto no one, and it went back down the shaft. The junior from compliance who had been staring at his shoes lifted his head. He looked at Melissa the way a man looks at a bridge he has walked across every day for 6 years and has just been told is made of a different material than he thought. Richard tried the room again. It was the muscle memory of a man who had run rooms for 30 years. He straightened his tie with 2 fingers. "Mister, I'm sorry. I don't believe we've been—" "Kang Min-jae," Min-jae said. He said it the way a man says his address to a taxi driver, without emphasis, without effort, and the 2 words were enough. Richard had read that name in the Wall Street Journal in October. He had read it in a Bloomberg alert in January. He had read it, 3 weeks ago, in a filing that Marcus had passed him about the ultimate ownership chain of the parent group, above the parent group, above the shell, that held the paper on the tower they were standing in. Richard felt his knees. He had felt his knees a few times in his life. He had felt them when his first wife had left. He had felt them at the deposition in 2019. He had felt them the morning his father died. He felt them now, and the feeling was worse than the other 3 combined, because it was public. "There has been a mistake," Richard said. "There has been a mistake," Min-jae agreed. He did not say whose. Diana had not looked up from the pen. She was watching the pen with the concentration of a woman watching a small animal she has just realized is not what she thought. Her lipstick had smudged at the corner and she did not know it. Pearl watched from behind the reception counter and did not lift the phone that was still lit with the 4th line, and did not lift the phone that was still lit with the 5th line. Pearl's face was very still. She had understood 2 days ago, and she was understanding again now, and the second understanding was not less than the first. Melissa spoke, low, only to Min-jae. In Korean. She said, "You broke the pact." He answered in Korean, without turning his face from Richard. so that no one in the hall could read even the shape of the word. I broke it at 8:52, when you did not call me. I have been in the car since then. You waited. You asked me once, 3 years ago, not to arrive before you asked. I waited as long as I could. How long could you? 19 minutes. She looked at him then. The look was very brief. It was not gratitude, and it was not apology. It was a thing between them that had a name only in the private language, and the private language did not translate. He felt it against the side of his jaw. He returned to English. Directors, he said. He did not raise his voice. He raised the register of the room by lowering his own. There will be a meeting, boardroom A, now. Richard did not move. Han Do-yoon's voice returned on the phones. Not on all of them this time. On 3. Richard's cell, the reception line 1, the fixed phone on Diana's assistant's desk. The 3 phones lit up in sequence, and the same calm, accented voice said, in English, "Please do not make Mr. Kang ask twice." Richard's cell was still against his thigh. He lifted it. He listened to the dial tone he had missed. He slid the phone into his jacket pocket. He turned toward boardroom A. He walked. His hip caught the corner of a desk on the way, and he did not adjust his path. Marcus followed. His hand left the glass and left a print behind that would take a cleaner 2 swipes to remove that evening. Diana bent to pick up her pen. Han's voice was gone from the phones. She held the pen at her side like she had forgotten what it was for. The 4 bodyguards moved with them, not as escort, as geometry, 1 in front, 2 abreast at the back, 1 closing the corridor behind. The junior from compliance took a step to the side to let them pass and forgot to close his mouth. Melissa did not move yet. Min Jae did not move yet either. He was still holding her hand. He turned to her, fully, for the first time since the elevator had opened. His eyes were the eyes she had married, cold in public, and, in the fraction where he let the cold slip, very tired. "I am sorry," he said, in English, so the hall would hear. She said, "You did what I would have done. You would not have. That was our agreement." That was our agreement 3 years ago. Agreements are made of the days they were made in. Today is a different day. He took a breath. She watched it move under the black silk of his tie. "I did not want to be the reason you were seen." "I was not being seen, Min Jae. I was being erased. There is a difference." He nodded, one small motion. He said nothing more in English. In Korean, so low that only she and Nathan could hear, he said, "I have brought 14 files. You will decide which are opened." She understood. She had known it in the elevator. She had known it in the folder handoff. She had known it in the click of the brass. Nathan Reed did not travel with 14 files unless the day was going to end differently than it had begun. She said, in English, so the hall would hear the tone if not the substance, "Let's walk." He offered his arm. She did not take it. She took his hand again instead, at fingers, palm not pressed. The distinction was small, and it was for her. She lifted the cardboard box with her other hand. The framed photograph inside shifted against the fountain pen. The silk scarf slid a 1/4 inch. She adjusted it without looking down. They walked. Not toward the elevator. Toward boardroom A. Toward the hall she had crossed alone at 9 o'clock. The same tile, the same overhead light, the same 40 faces along the wall. She crossed it now with her husband beside her, and her cardboard box against her hip, and the crossing took the same number of steps, and it did not feel like the same crossing. She had known it would not. She had been afraid of that, and now she was walking through the exact substance of the fear, and the fear was the size she had estimated. Nathan had once told her that the size of a feared thing is almost always the size you have measured. It is the unmeasured ones that grow. Halfway across the hall, she stopped. She stopped because Pearl was standing. Pearl had come around from behind the reception counter. She stood at the edge of the carpet, hands folded in front of her waist. She was very young in that moment, 24. The office did not look at her often, and it did not look at her now, but Melissa did. "Ms. Grant," Pearl said. Her voice was steady. "Pearl, I did not answer the phone. I know. I would like to keep my job." Melissa held her eyes for a second. "Two," she said. "You have it." Pearl swallowed. She stepped back, half a step, and returned her hands to the counter. She did not sit. She was going to stand for the next 30 minutes, and she did not know it yet, and she would stand well. Min-jae watched the exchange without interfering. When Melissa turned back to him, he said, in Korean, she was the first to know. She was. "How?" "A mug. The one with the engraving?" "Yes." He smiled. It was the smallest smile he had smiled all week. It did not reach the room. It reached only Melissa, and it reached only for the length of one breath, and then it was gone. They resumed the walk. Diana had gone into boardroom A. Marcus had gone in. Richard had gone in. The 4 bodyguards had positioned themselves, 1 inside the room at the back wall, 1 outside the door, 2 at the end of the corridor. Nathan reached the doorway a half step before Melissa and did not enter. He turned. He held the door for her. She passed through it with the box against her hip and the folder gone from the top of the box, and her husband's hand loose in hers. Inside, the 3 executives were standing. Richard behind his own chair, at the head of the table, gripping the leather. Marcus at the middle of the long side, arms at his sides, glasses now correctly on the bridge of his nose, because he had adjusted them twice in 10 steps. Diana at the far end, back very straight, pen finally in her jacket pocket, hands empty. Melissa did not go to the head of the table. Not yet. She set the cardboard box on the credenza against the wall, the way a person sets down a coat that is heavier than they had noticed. She placed the box carefully, so the frame did not fall face down. She did not remove anything from it. She left the fountain pen inside, the silk scarf inside, the photograph inside. She left them because she was not there yet. She had not accepted anything yet. She had not signed anything yet. She would not carry the pen out of the box until she meant it. She turned. She faced the room. She let go of Min-jae's hand. He took a step back from her, a single, deliberate step, and stopped at a distance that made it clear to everyone in the room that whatever happened next was not going to happen through him. He did not sit. He did not lean against the wall. He stood, precisely at the distance of a man who has come to watch and not to speak. Nathan set the briefcase on the far end of the table, on the opposite side from Diana, and did not open it. He rested one hand on the top. The old brass lock clicked once, softly, as the mechanism settled. Nothing came out yet. Nothing needed to yet. Melissa looked at Richard. "Sit down," she said. Richard sat. She looked at Diana. Diana sat. She looked at Marcus. Marcus sat. She did not sit. She stood at the corner of the table opposite Richard's chair, one hand loose at her side, one hand resting on the smooth wood. She had stood in this room every Monday morning for 11 months, taking notes, refilling water, being asked to close the door on her way out. She had crossed this table with a coffee tray. She had crossed it with binders. She had crossed it once with a check for a bonus that was not hers and had never been credited to her. She did not think about any of that now. She thought about the folder inside the briefcase, and about the 13 other folders she had not yet been told were in there, and about the 3 sentences on the cream-colored paper folded once inside the envelope in her desk drawer that she had touched with her palm at 8:31 this morning without opening. She said, "Before we begin." 3 faces waited. "I want everyone in this room to understand something," she said. "This is not because I am someone's wife." Richard began to speak. She did not let him. "You will find out in a moment," she said. "Who signs your paychecks?" When you find out, you will be tempted to reduce this to that. Do not. She let the sentence stand. This is because I have been the most competent person in this building for 4 years, and you decided that competence was not a good enough reason to see me. That is not a mistake I am going to help you correct. That is a mistake I am going to bill you for. Diana's throat moved. Marcus lowered his eyes to the wood. Richard opened his mouth for a third time and did not use it. Melissa looked at Nathan. Nathan opened the briefcase. Nathan did not lift anything out yet. He turned the briefcase 45 degrees, so the interior faced Melissa and not the 3 seated executives. That angle alone said a sentence none of them wanted to hear. What was inside would be shown to her first, and to them second, and only if she decided. Melissa took 1 step along the long side of the table. Her heels sounded once, then once again. She stopped behind Marcus. Marcus's shoulders climbed toward his ears without his permission. "Marcus," she said, "just the name." He half-turned in the chair. He tried to lift his chin. It came up 2 inches and stalled. "You brought me the report on a Thursday. You put the yellow tab on page 19 because you knew I would open the report at page 1 and read straight through, and page 19 is where I would stop breathing. You knew that about me." Marcus said nothing. "You watched me read for 4 years. You knew the exact place I would stop. You spent 4 years learning how I read so you could use it against me on one Thursday." She moved on to the empty space behind Diana. Diana had 1 hand flat on the table and 1 hand in the pocket where the pen now lived. Her platinum bob did not catch the light the same way it had in the hall. Something in her posture had abandoned her. "I am not going to speak to you yet," Melissa said. "You will wait." Diana's mouth opened a half-inch. It closed. Melissa reached the head of the table. Richard was not in that chair. Richard had chosen the chair 1 seat down, on the long side, the safer chair, the chair a lawyer sits in when he expects a deposition. Nobody had asked him to sit there. He had walked in and taken it on instinct. The chair at the head was empty. Melissa did not sit in it. She stood beside it. She placed her right hand on its back, at the top rail, the way a host places a hand on the back of a guest's chair. She did not look at Richard. "Nathan," she said. Nathan slid the first file out. A plain gray folder, thin, with a red band along the spine. He set it on the table an arm's length from Melissa and pushed it forward with 2 fingers. It slid on the wood and stopped in front of the empty head chair. Nathan did not open it. "The first one is small," Melissa said. "It is a courtesy." She still did not sit. She lifted the folder herself. She read page 1 for 4 seconds, turned to page 2, read 4 more, and closed it. She slid it, gently, in front of Richard. "Read the first line," she said. Richard's small, pale blue eyes went to the page. He read. The muscle at the corner of his jaw twitched twice. Out loud. He shook his head, 1 small motion. "Richard." Out loud. His tongue moved behind his teeth. He read. "Notice of termination of officer. Recipient, Richard Blake." The words came out flat because he was trying to keep them from coming out at all. Effective date. He stopped. "Read it." "Today," he said, 10 a.m. The clock on the credenza said 9:29. "You have 31 minutes as the CEO of a company you do not own," Melissa said. "Use them well." Richard's ruddy complexion had turned 2 shades toward gray. The sneer, the permanent tight sneer, had loosened at the corners without his knowing. He was trying to hold it in place, and it kept slipping. "On what authority?" he said. Melissa did not answer with her mouth. She looked at Nathan. Nathan slid a second folder across, thicker than the first, blue band along the spine. He placed it between Richard and Marcus so that both could see it. He did not open it either. "On the authority in that folder," Melissa said. Richard looked at the blue folder. He did not touch it. Min Jae, one step behind Melissa, had not said a word since he had let go of her hand. He had made himself into a wall. The four fingers of his right hand rested along his thigh, and the single thin silver band on the ring finger caught the ceiling light once when he shifted his weight. That was his only movement. Diana finally could not hold the silence. "Melissa," she said. Her voice came out one pitch higher than she meant. "Whatever you think happened here." "Sit," Melissa said. She had not raised her voice. Diana sat further into the chair. "I told you I was not going to speak to you yet. That has not changed." Diana's throat worked. Melissa turned back to Richard. He was staring at the blue folder like it was a live thing. "Open it, Richard." He did not. "Richard." His hand, the one with the gold cufflink, went out. He touched the corner of the folder with one finger. He did not open it. "I did not build the humiliation you built for me this morning," Melissa said. "That is not my language. But I will build one that is quieter and lasts longer. Open the folder." He opened it. The top sheet was a single page, cream stock, heavy, 3 lines of print, centered, then a signature block. He read the first line, and his mouth went dry so fast it was audible. He did not read the second. He closed the folder without meaning to. His hand shook once and settled. "You do not have to read it now," Melissa said. "You will read it later. You will read it many times." She turned from him. She had done enough with him for the moment. She had put the taste of it in his mouth. She looked at Han Do-yoon, who was not in the room, and who was, through the phone that had begun to buzz on the credenza behind Nathan. Nathan lifted the phone. He listened for 5 seconds. He nodded once. He put the phone down. "The floor is clear," Nathan said. "Just that." Melissa understood. Min Jae understood. Richard, Diana, and Marcus did not. Down the hall, Han's people had asked the 40 employees to return to their desks and close their monitors. Not one refused. The floor had gone silent in a way that would carry through the vents. Pearl Whitfield had been allowed to stay at reception. Melissa had asked for that specifically, with one word to Nathan on the way in. "Marcus," Melissa said. Marcus flinched. His silver frame glasses had slid a 1/4 inch down his nose again. "You will not speak. You will listen. You have talked enough for 1/4. He did not answer. She had not asked him to. "You have signed page 27 of a report 17 times in the last 3 years, Marcus. 17, on 17 Thursdays. That is a number I know without checking. Do you know why I know it without checking?" He shook his head. It was a small motion. "Because on each of those Thursdays, a different signature was already on page 27 before yours. A second signature, on the counter-signature line, under an initial and a title." She let the pause settle. "You never once wondered what M. Grant, independent auditor, meant." Marcus's face did something under the skin. His jaw did not move. His eyes did. Diana's head turned toward Marcus, then slower back to Melissa. She had been in this firm long enough to know what those letters ought to mean, and had never let herself see it. Richard's throat worked once. "You have been reading my rejections for 3 years, Marcus. On different letterhead, under a different address. You have been paying invoices to me for 3 years. You have paid the invoices out of a discretionary account that you personally control. You have paid on the 16th of the month every month because that is when the invoice arrives. The invoices arrive on the 16th because I decided the 16th. You never looked at the routing on the wire." Marcus's shoulders came down 2 inches. Not relief. Something like a man who has just seen the edge of a shape and understood that the rest of it was bigger than the room. "That was not the full point I wanted to make to you," Melissa said. "I will make the full point later. That was preparation." She moved back to the head of the table. Still standing, her fingers rested on the top rail of the chair. Min Jae, behind her, spoke for the first time inside the room. He spoke in English, and he spoke low, the way he always spoke. "May I?" Melissa nodded once, without turning. Min-jae came half a step forward. He did not stand next to her. He stood a clear step behind. The distance was deliberate, and every person in the room felt it. He was here as a witness, not as a co-signatory. He looked at Richard. "You addressed my wife as an assistant this morning." Richard's small eyes went to Min-jae and could not stay. "You told her she did not know her place. You said this at the water dispenser. You gathered your people to hear it." Min-jae's voice was still low. It did not lift. It did not need to. "I would ask you a question. Please answer honestly. It will matter for the rest of your morning." Richard nodded before he knew he was nodding. "Did you gather them because you believed she should be humiliated? Or because you were afraid that if you did it in private, she would not accept it, and you needed the crowd to hold her in place?" Richard did not answer. "I will ask again in 15 minutes if you have not answered by then." Min-jae stepped back one step. He resumed his wall. Richard's hand had gone to his burgundy silk tie, near the gold pin. He pulled the knot a 1/4 inch. He did not loosen it further. He did not have the courage to loosen it further with a man like Kang Min-jae in the room. Diana's hand had come out of the pocket. The pen was in it. She had taken it out without thinking. She looked at the pen. She put it back. Melissa saw the pen come out and go back in. She filed it. She would use it later. Nathan slid a 3rd folder across. Green band. He placed it in front of Diana. "This one is yours," Melissa said. Diana did not move. "You are welcome to read it now. You are welcome to read it in an hour. It says the same thing at 9:32 as it will say at 10:32. Diana's fingers went to the folder. They stopped an inch from it. They retreated. "Diana, yes, you smiled this morning. In the hall, when Richard used the phrase, 'your place,' you smiled a specific smile. It was not a smile of surprise. It was a smile of preparation. You had been waiting for that phrase." Diana's face was white now, the platinum blonde and the white of her cheeks running into one shade. "I am not going to ask you to explain the smile. I am going to describe it to you so that you understand that I saw it, and that I am not the only one who saw it, and that the recording of the hallway from the camera in the copier housing has already been pulled." Nathan lifted a small matte black rectangle from an inner pocket of the briefcase and set it on the wood. It was a hard drive. It made a quiet, definitive sound. Diana's chest lifted. It did not fall for a long moment. "You built this morning with him," Melissa said. "You did the choreography. Richard is not smart enough to choreograph a hallway. You are." Richard's head turned toward Diana in a way that gave up the entire scheme in one motion. "You did not tell me you were pulling the video," Richard said to Diana. The room felt what he had just done. He had confirmed the choreography by defending himself against it. Diana closed her eyes for a full second. The boardroom door opened without a knock. Han Do-yoon stepped inside, crossed to Nathan, placed a folded sheet on top of the briefcase, and stood 1 meter to his left, calm the way a wall is calm. Melissa acknowledged him with the smallest lift of her chin. Han returned it in kind. Their working relationship had a language older than this room. Nathan unfolded the sheet. He read it. He nodded once at Min-jae. Min-jae, behind Melissa, spoke in Korean. 3 words, low. Melissa answered in Korean, 4 words, also low. Diana, Richard, and Marcus heard the language and heard how ordinary it was in this pair's mouths. They understood at the level of instinct that this was not a language learned. It was a language lived in. Melissa spoke in English again. "The subsidiary in Singapore has been placed under a hold this morning. The 9-figure acquisition the board was going to vote on this week is not going to be voted on. The vote has been withdrawn." Marcus's head came up. "That is not possible. It has been done. The chair has to withdraw the vote. The chair withdrew the vote at 9:22, Marcus. 6 minutes ago. You do not know the chair as well as you thought you did. Marcus did not answer. He had run out of things it was safe to say. Melissa turned to the empty head chair. She looked at it for the first time as an object she might occupy. Her hand was still on the top rail. She did not move the chair. She did not pull it out. She would sit, but not yet. Not while there were still lines she wanted to draw standing. She looked at Richard. You have a family, she said. You have a wife in Bronxville who does not know what you have signed on Thursdays. You have a daughter at Columbia who thinks her tuition is being paid out of your salary. It is being paid out of the Singapore ledger you asked me to sign. That will stop this afternoon. Richard's mouth opened. I will pay her tuition through the semester, Melissa said. Because she is 19 years old and did not choose you. That is not a mercy for you. That is a courtesy to her. Richard's mouth closed. You will explain the change in payment to your wife tonight. You will not lie about it. I will know if you lie about it. There are people in your household who work for me. Richard's ruddy complexion had gone past gray now. There was a color at his jawline that was almost blue. Diana's eyes moved to Richard, and there was, for a single second, a flicker of pity in them that she immediately closed off. Melissa lifted her hand from the top rail of the chair. Sit up, Richard. He sat up. You will not be spoken to like a boy for the rest of the morning. That is not what this is. That is what you did to me. It is not what I am doing to you. She let that land. What I am doing to you is quieter. It has been in motion for 11 months. You did not notice because you were busy learning how to say the phrase, your place, with the right shape of mouth. Richard's eyes closed for a full breath. She looked at Marcus. Marcus, stand up. Marcus stood. Take off your glasses. His hand went up. The thin silver frames came off. His face was smaller without them. Look at me. He looked at her. I want you to hold this look for 1 full minute. I want you to remember for the rest of your career what my face looks like without the frame you have been putting on it for 4 years. He looked. His hand, holding the glasses, trembled once. Then it steadied. He held the look. Diana's mouth opened, as if she might speak. Melissa did not turn her head. Diana, not yet. Diana's mouth closed. Marcus held the look. Melissa held it back. The minute went slowly. Behind her, Min-jae did not move. At 40 seconds, the desk phone on the credenza rang. Nathan lifted it, listened, hung up. The board, he said. They can wait 10 minutes. They will wait 10 minutes. At 60 seconds, Melissa lowered her chin a 1/4 inch. Sit down, Marcus. Marcus sat. Put the glasses on. He put them on. You will not be signing anything else at this firm. You will be signing at the office of the district attorney. Your counsel will be present. You will be given the choice of which subject matter of the 17 you would like to cooperate on first. You will make that choice by 5 p.m. tomorrow. Marcus's throat moved. You will not go home tonight before you have spoken to Nathan. He will explain the procedure. He is generous with time. He will be less generous if you make him repeat himself. Marcus nodded. Melissa breathed once, slowly. She had not sat down. She was still not going to sit down. Not until she had said the thing that had been sitting inside her chest since 7:52 that morning. She turned to face the whole room. Her curls moved once and settled. You will each be shown a document in the next 30 minutes that explains why this room is my room. She let the sentence settle. I am not going to explain it to you now. I am going to let the document explain it. That is not because I owe you the courtesy of a document. That is because I want you to feel, for 30 minutes, what it is to sit in a room whose ownership you have miscounted. Nathan's hand had come to rest on top of the briefcase. He did not open it further. You will sit in that miscounting until Nathan is ready. He is going to leave the room now for a call. When he returns, he will open the folders in front of you one by one, and he will read them aloud. That is when you will understand. She looked at each of them in turn. Richard, Diana, Marcus. You have 30 minutes to prepare your faces. She did not smile. Nathan closed the briefcase halfway, latched it once, lifted it from the table, and walked to the door. Han Do-yoon opened the door for him without a word. Nathan stepped out. The door closed. Min-jae remained one step behind Melissa. He did not touch her. Melissa pulled the head chair back 6 inches. She still did not sit. She looked once at the credenza where her box of personal items rested. The framed photo of the pier faced the wall. The fountain pen was still capped. The silk scarf was folded in thirds. She did not touch the box. She lifted her eyes to the panoramic window at the far end of the boardroom. The building she owned across the avenue caught the morning light on its south face. From this angle, at this hour, its shadow fell exactly across the entrance of the tower they were sitting in. She had never told anyone in this firm that the shadow was hers. She turned back to the room. 30 minutes, she said again, and she waited. The clock on the credenza kept its own count. 9:36, 9:37. Melissa had not looked at it once, and that was the discipline. She stood behind the head chair with her fingertips resting on the leather, and she let the silence do the arithmetic. Richard Blake breathed through his mouth. That was the tell she had known for 4 years and never used until now. His shoulders sat higher than his ears wanted them to. The heavy gold wristwatch made a small tick against the walnut every time his hand tightened on the arm of the chair. He was counting too. He was counting differently. Marcus Chen had put his glasses back on and now took them off again. He folded the temples with both hands, precise, symmetrical, the way a man folds something when he needs a task that requires no decision. He placed the glasses on the table in front of him and slid them a half-inch to the right, then a half-inch back. The lenses caught the overhead light and threw a small oval onto the tabletop. He watched the oval. Diana Whitmore kept her hand near her pocket, not inside it, near it. The pen she had returned to Melissa was now 3 feet away, on the wood, still capped. Diana's hand hovered like a person who has quit smoking and finds she no longer knows where to keep her fingers. Min-jae stood 1 step behind Melissa. He had not shifted his weight since Nathan left the room. His hands were folded low in front of him, one wrist across the other, thumb on the flat of a knuckle. He had learned that stance the year he turned 20, in a room where the man who taught it to him was still alive at the end of the meeting, only because he stood that way. Han Do-yoon was by the door, ear cocked slightly toward the corridor. His earpiece was silent for now. 9:38. "May I speak?" Diana said. Not a question with punctuation, a request without hope. Melissa let 3 seconds pass. No. Diana's chin lifted a millimeter. She had prepared a sentence, and it died in her throat. She closed her lips over her teeth, and the small muscle at her jaw worked once. Richard tried a different door. There are shareholders who will need to be notified. There are protocols. Do you know them? Melissa said. Of course. Name 3. Richard's mouth opened. He shut it. He had never once opened the governance binder that lived on the shelf behind his desk. He had signed the tab that said he had read it, and then he had gone to lunch. Melissa watched the memory pass through his face, and she did not name it. Marcus made a sound in the back of his throat that was not a word. He picked the glasses back up. He put them on. He put his hands on the table, palms flat, and left them there. The palms left 2 humid smudges on the walnut. He looked at Melissa, and he tried to keep his eyes still. I have a question, he said. You have several. Just one, for now. Ask it. The 17 Thursdays. He had to swallow before he could finish. You saw every one. I saw every one. And you kept coming to work. Melissa let her hand slide from the leather to the head of the chair, one fingertip along the seam of the stitching. I kept coming to work. Because I was building the record you are about to be tried on. And because I had a lease and I liked the lease, and because I was not going to give you the satisfaction of making me disappear before it was mine to do. Marcus took his hands off the table. He put them in his lap. The 2 smudges on the walnuts stayed where they were. 9:40. There was a sound that arrived from very far inside Melissa and reached the surface only as a small movement at the corner of her right eye, a thickening of the lash. She felt it before she saw it, the way weather is felt in the shoulders. A single tear had formed. It was not for Richard, it was not for Diana, it was not even for Marcus. It was for the woman who had walked out of the elevator that morning intending to be paid, at last, in the currency of being seen without any other name than her own, and who had spent that currency in the first 11 minutes of the day. She kept her hand where it was. That was the discipline. The tear held on the edge of the lash and refused the fall. She kept her chin level and her breath even. The cost had a shape. She could feel it settling under her ribs, like a stone finding the bottom of a well. For 4 years she had come to this floor with a private bargain, that when the day arrived, she would be lifted by the weight of her own work, and not by the surname stitched into a marriage certificate no one in this building had ever been shown. This morning, the bargain had been broken by a call that rang on 40 telephones at once, and it had been broken by a hand that took hers publicly at an elevator door, and it had been broken by the small tenderness in a man's voice, using the words, "my love," in a corridor full of witnesses. Every one of those breakings had been necessary. Every one of them had cost her the version of the ending she had planned in the drawer of her own head for 11 months. She was the most powerful person in the room, and the tear on her lash was for the woman she had almost been alone. Min-jae had noticed. He had noticed before she had. He did not move. He did not offer a handkerchief. He knew the shape of her decision as well as he knew the shape of her hand, and he honored it. He stood there and let the tear be hers. Richard saw it. Something in him leaned toward it. He had spent 30 years learning to read the smallest flinch in a room and turn it into leverage, and here was a flinch. He opened his mouth. "Richard!" Melissa's voice was so quiet it barely reached him. "Do not!" He closed his mouth. The tear stayed on the lash for 6 more seconds. Then it went back to wherever tears go when a woman refuses them. Her lash was dry. Her eyeline was direct. 9:42. Han's earpiece clicked. He listened. He looked at Min-jae. Min-jae looked at Melissa. Melissa nodded once. "The board's second call," Han said, in English, for the room. "They ask if you would like them to convene by conference in 10 minutes or by presence tomorrow at 7. "Presence," Melissa said. "Tomorrow, 6, not 7. 6. "And tell the chair I will not be joined by counsel. I will be joined by the auditor." Han's mouth did not move. He spoke into the earpiece in Korean, brief, and then he was still again. Diana had followed enough of it. She understood that the auditor and the woman standing behind the head chair were the same person, and that a room of 9 board members would learn that fact at 6 in the morning, and that whatever Diana had told the 2 directors on the executive committee at dinner 3 Fridays ago was now a matter of the record too. Her hand went into her pocket at last, because it had to go somewhere. Her palm found the seam and pressed. Marcus spoke without being invited. "My son." Melissa waited. "He is 12. I know. He plays hockey on Saturdays." He said this the way a man reads out a piece of paper he cannot bear to look at. "He has a game this Saturday." "He will have his game." Marcus lowered his head, not in gratitude. In the small collapse of a man who had prepared himself to be told, in front of Richard, that his son would learn from a paragraph in the Times what his father was. Melissa had chosen not to say it. That was not tenderness. That was cost containment on a child. "I am not doing this to your family," she said. "You did that. I am doing this to you." Marcus nodded once, then again. He kept nodding until Min-jae glanced at Han, and Han cleared his throat softly, and Marcus stopped. 9:44. The door opened. Pearl Whitfield stood in the frame with her hands folded across the front of her blouse, and she did not come in. She stood at the threshold and she looked at Melissa. Her lips were parted, but she did not speak. She had been given permission to remain at the front desk, and she had left it. She had walked the length of the corridor to be inside the doorway of this room at this exact hour. Melissa saw her. Min-jae saw her. Han saw her. Richard did not turn to look, because he had learned in the first minute of this hour that turning his head made him smaller. "Ms. Whitfield," Melissa said, "come in." Pearl came in. She stayed near the door. She placed her back against the glass so that she was neither at the table nor away from it, and she folded her hands lower, at her waist, and she waited to be told why she had been called. Melissa had not called her. Melissa understood, from the way the young woman stood, that Pearl had come because she needed to be a witness for a version of herself that would exist tomorrow morning at the front desk, answering telephones from reporters. Pearl needed to be able to say, later, in the small privacy of her own head, that she had stood in the room. "Stand where you are," Melissa said, gentle. "Watch. That is your job for the next 10 minutes. Pearl blinked once. Her eyes filled. She did not let anything fall either. She had learned, in the last hour, from the woman she had always thought was a senior analyst, that some tears are kept. 9:45. Melissa turned her attention back to Richard. She took her fingers off the head chair. She placed both palms on the table. "You have 12 minutes left as chief executive of a company you do not own," she said. "I am going to spend 11 of them talking. You are going to spend the 12th, deciding whether to keep your mouth shut on your way out, or open it. I would advise you to close it. I am not offering that advice as a courtesy. I am offering it as arithmetic." Richard's fingers loosened on the arm of the chair. He put his hands in his lap. The heavy gold watch caught the light on its way down, and then it was under the table. "Diana." Melissa did not look at her. "The green folder." Diana opened it. She had not opened it since it slid to her 20 minutes ago. The pages inside were her own emails, printed on ivory paper, 3-hole punched, tabbed. She saw her own name at the top of the first tab, and her stomach found a floor she had not known existed inside her body. "You will read pages 9, 17, and 34 aloud," Melissa said. Diana's throat moved. "In here. In here. To whom?" "To Pearl." The room found its stillness. Pearl looked up. She did not want this. She understood, in a slow way, that she was being given something, that the thing she was being given was not a favor, that the woman at the head of the table had spent the morning being spoken about in front of 40 people and would now spend 8 minutes being read to, once, in front of one. And that Pearl was the one, because Pearl was the smallest person in the building this morning, and the smallest person was the whole building. "Page 9, Diana began. Her voice was not her boardroom voice. It was thinner. She read a paragraph she had written to Richard on a Tuesday in March. She read her own sentence about hiring an assistant who would not make trouble about the numbers. She read her own aside about the analyst on the 7th row who was too polished for the pay grade and needed a reason to leave. She read the sentence she had written about that reason being easy to manufacture in a firm where certain types of women were not expected to argue. Pearl's hands stayed folded at her waist. Her eyes stayed on Diana. She did not flinch. She did not narrow her gaze. She listened. Page 17. Diana read Marcus into the plan. She read Richard 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 into the plan. Marcus put his face in his hands. Just his eyes, just the space above his cheekbones. His mouth was still visible and it was slack. Page 34. Diana read a line she had not remembered writing. It was 2 months old. It said, in her own hand, that if the Singapore acquisition closed clean, she would move into Richard's office in the fall, and Richard would take the honorary chairman title with an office on 29 and a car service. She read her own name signing off. She read her own initial. She stopped. "Finish it," Melissa said. "There is one more line." "Finish it." Diana read the last line. It said that once the office move was complete, the analyst on the 7th row would be given a smaller cubicle by the copier, or nothing at all, at Diana's discretion. Richard's face turned toward Diana. He did not speak. He had learned, at last, that his voice was no longer an asset in this room. Pearl said nothing. She was still standing against the glass. Her hands were still folded at her waist. She had heard her own working conditions described in the terms of a woman who had once wanted her chair and would have taken it without noticing that a person sat there. "Thank you, Ms. Whitmore," Melissa said. "Close the folder." Diana closed the folder. Her fingertips left a light print on the ivory paper along the edge, and she did not wipe it. 9:51. Han's earpiece clicked again. He listened. He did not translate. He looked at Min-jae, and Min-jae's eyes crossed to Melissa, and Melissa said, "Yes." The door at the far end of the corridor opened. Nathan Reed had come back 3 minutes early. He was walking without hurry, briefcase closed, and by the small change in Han's posture, the entire room understood that whatever Nathan carried in his hand was the document Melissa had told them, 21 minutes before, that they would see in 30. Nathan reached the threshold. He did not come in. He stood beside Pearl, briefcase against his shin, and he waited for Melissa's nod. Melissa did not nod yet. She turned, slowly, and she looked at the panoramic window behind her. The shadow of her building had shifted on the avenue below. It was longer now. It reached across the entrance canopy of the tower and touched the base of the flagpole on the far side. She had watched that shadow for 4 years from the 7th row cubicle. She had never told anyone whose it was. She had promised herself that she would tell them on a Tuesday. She turned back. "Nathan," she said. "Come in." Nathan came in. Melissa put her right hand on the head chair. She did not pull it further. She did not sit. She looked at Richard and she said, very quietly, 9 minutes. Then she opened the drawer of her own throat, and she did not let a single thing fall. Nathan set the closed briefcase on the walnut and clicked the brass lock once. The sound was smaller than it had been at 9:25, and larger. He did not open the case yet. He looked at Melissa first. She let 3 seconds pass. Then she nodded, once, at the height of a woman who had rehearsed this nod alone in a mirror for months and had decided, 20 minutes ago, to use it. Nathan opened the case. He took out 4 folders bound in oxblood cloth, each stitched at the spine with a thin gold thread. He did not fan them for show. He laid them in a straight column along the near edge of the table, corners aligned to the walnut grain. He set one in front of Richard, one in front of Marcus, one in front of Diana. He kept the 4th in his hand. Then, from the inside sleeve, he drew a single sheet of ivory paper, folded once. He carried it around the table without looking at anyone, and placed it beside Melissa's right hand. She glanced at it, and only she glanced. "Read them," Melissa said. "Cover to signature block. Aloud is not necessary. I have heard reading in this building enough for one lifetime." Richard's fingers refused the cloth twice before they took it. Marcus opened his without looking down. Diana opened hers with the flat of her palm, the way a woman opens a bill she already knows. Pearl stood against the glass, hands still crossed at her waist. Han shifted his weight a quarter inch and settled. Melissa watched Richard's eyes travel down the first page. She counted. 3 seconds on the header, 4 on the first paragraph. Then his throat moved and did not swallow. "Turn the page," she said. He turned it. "Turn the next." He turned it. "Stop on 7. He stopped. "Read the party of the second part." His mouth opened. It stayed open a moment before the sound arrived. "Melissa Grant," he said. And then, because the paper made him do it, sole legal owner of record. Marcus's folder was already at 7. He had gotten there faster. His face was the color of the paper. "Kang Group Holdings," Melissa said, quiet as a hand closing a drawer. "The tower you have collected your parking privileges under for 11 years. The subsidiary in Singapore whose ledger you tried to marry to my signature. The 14 sister entities that pay the rent on the 14 floors above this one, and the 22 below. All of it, on paper, in my name." Diana had not spoken. She was looking at the second signature line on page 9, where a witness had signed in a hand she recognized because she had once, in a hallway, asked whose hand it was and been told it belonged to someone above her pay grade. "That is Nathan," Melissa said, without looking. "Yes." Diana closed the folder. Richard tried the word how. It came out cracked at the second letter. He tried it again and did not finish. Melissa let the silence sit, not for cruelty, for the arithmetic of it. She wanted the room to hear the exact size of the mistake it had made, and silence was the only measuring stick large enough. Then she picked up the ivory sheet Nathan had placed by her hand. She did not unfold it. She turned it a quarter and set it down face up. The header read, in a font she had chosen herself 3 winters ago, "M. Grant, Independent Auditor," and beneath the header, dated 2 months before this Tuesday, a rejection letter she had already sent, already filed, already stamped by the Office of the State Auditor's Referral Desk. "The report Marcus wanted me to sign," she said, "was rejected in March, by me, under a different letterhead. The rejection is in Trenton. The rejection has been in Trenton for 8 weeks. Marcus lowered his forehead onto his knuckles. "Richard," she said, and waited until his eyes lifted. "You have been countersigning rejections all year. You did not read them. You never read them. Marcus assured you they were routine. They were not routine. They were mine." Richard's hand went to the knot of his tie and did not loosen it. It sat there like a hand on a doorknob that would not turn. "That means," Melissa said, "the fraud you tried to force through my signature had already been refused by the auditor whose signature you have been coasting on since April of the year before last. You did not just try to compel your assistant to endorse a lie. You tried to compel the auditor who had already refused it to endorse it a second time, under her working name, so that the paper trail would appear consistent to a board that would never be shown the underlying rejection. That is not an accounting matter, Richard. That is a criminal one. Marcus knows this. Marcus has known it since March. Marcus was hoping the rejection would get lost in a filing cabinet somewhere in Newark. Marcus did not know I kept a copy in Trenton. Marcus had not lifted his head. "Look at me," she said. He lifted it. "Say the word, copy." "Copy," he said. Louder. "Copy." Once more. "Copy." She let the third one hang. Then she moved her eyes off him, as though putting down something she was tired of holding. Behind her, Min Jae remained 1 step back. He did not touch her. He had not touched her since the moment she'd let go of his hand at the door. He was, in the geometry of this room, a witness, not a partner in the sentence. He had brought her 14 files, and he had told her she would decide which were opened. She had opened one. That one was the tower they were sitting in. She glanced, quickly, at the panorama window. The shadow of her building had moved another degree east. It now cut the base of the flagpole, and traveled up the granite step of the entrance across the avenue. Anyone in the plaza at that minute was standing in a shadow she owned. She had never said that sentence aloud to anyone in this firm. She had said it, 3 years ago, only once, to the man behind her, and only in Korean, and only after he had put down the fountain pen. She let the memory come in. 7 seconds. She counted them the way she had counted, at 7 the previous evening, the exhalations of the man asleep on her shoulder, so she would know she was still in her own life. 3 winters ago, his study on the top floor of the house in the private suburb. The lamp on his desk was the only source of light, and its shade was cream. Nathan sat opposite him, briefcase open in the lap of a leather chair, papers already fanned. Min Jae did not sit. He stood at the desk with the fountain pen in his right hand. The transfer instrument was 31 pages. He read every page. He read every page in front of her. He did not read them aloud. When he arrived at the signature block on 29, he looked up at her and asked, in Korean, the only question that mattered, "Are you sure?" She had said yes. He had signed. Then he had turned the instrument toward her and asked her to sign as receiving party. She had read her own signature line 3 times before she wrote her name. When she finished, she had put the pen down on the blotter, aligned it to the grain, and said, in Korean, "I will tell them one day, on a Tuesday." He had asked why a Tuesday. She had said, because Tuesday is the day nothing important is supposed to happen. He had not laughed. He had folded the instrument, handed it to Nathan, and said, in English, "Then Tuesday is the day I will not interfere." 7 seconds. She let them close. The board of the room came back. At Richard's tie, Marcus's forehead, Diana's fingers on the closed folder, Pearl at the glass, Han at the door. "You are wondering," she said, and stopped, because she had promised herself she would not lecture in this room, how a rejection I filed under a working name was not caught by any of you. It was not caught because Marcus paid the invoices out of a discretionary account so small that no board member has ever looked at the 16th of a month closely enough to see it. I knew the invoices would clear, because I invoiced myself the amount that Marcus had already budgeted, to the cent. I made the numbers small enough to be invisible and precise enough to be uncontested. I did that for 3 years so I could stand where I am standing right now and tell you what you have been paying for. Diana lifted a finger, then set it flat again. Question, Melissa said. No, Diana said. I understood. Good. Melissa moved, not around the table, toward the head of it. She placed both hands on the top of the leather chair she had left untaken since beat 4. She looked at Richard. She looked at Marcus. She looked at Diana. She looked, briefly, at Pearl. Then she pulled the chair. 6 more inches. Enough to walk into. She sat. The chair did not creak. She had once, standing at the door to this room with a tray of coffee, wondered whether it would. It did not. She placed her forearms on the walnut and folded her hands loosely, the way a woman folds hands she has never had to keep still by force. The chestnut light in her curls caught the panorama. I am not accepting this seat because I am his wife, she said. Her voice was the same one she had used to say good morning to Diana at 7:52. I am accepting it because I was always too competent to be an assistant, and you were too blind to see it. Sit up, Richard. He sat up. Nathan. Nathan opened the 4th folder in his hand and laid 3 documents in a fan in front of her, 1 for each seated executive. Richard Blake. She did not raise her volume. Terminated for cause, effective the moment I finish this sentence. Cause, attempted procurement of fraudulent audit endorsement, in the 2nd degree. Referral, the Office of the United States Attorney for the Southern District, tomorrow at 9. Your resignation from the board of Kang Group Holdings has already been recorded. Your access to this floor ends at the elevator. Your access to the 29th floor ends there also. You do not get a chairman's office. You do not get a car service. You will leave through the lobby, on foot, past the security desk, that just watched you fire your auditor by name. Do you understand the sentence? His mouth said yes. His throat did the work. Marcus Chen. Same referral. Additional charge. 17 counts of countersigning rejected audits under an unauthorized second signature. You will meet Nathan in the lobby at 10:20. He will drive you to the U.S. Attorney's office. You will select your first count of cooperation before 5 p.m. tomorrow, as I told you at 9:20. Your son will have his hockey game on Saturday. I will make sure of it. That is the last thing I am doing for anyone in your household. Do you understand the sentence? Marcus said, yes. Diana Whitmore. She turned her head a quarter. You are not being terminated. You are being demoted. You will report on Monday to the file archive on the 11th floor. Your title is clerk. Your supervisor is me. You will remain in that title for as long as I decide. You will not attend the Wednesday partners meeting. You will not attend the Friday. You will not sign anything more consequential than a shipping manifest. You will keep the salary of a clerk. You will keep the office of a clerk, which is a desk against a wall. If you resign, I will find you in whatever firm you land at, and I will send them the page 34 you just read aloud to Pearl. Do you understand the sentence? Diana looked at Pearl. Pearl did not look back. I understand, Diana said. Sign. Nathan produced a pen. Not the fountain pen, a ballpoint. He clicked it once. Diana took it. She signed the demotion instrument. She slid it back. Richard signed the termination. Marcus signed the cooperation agreement without asking to read it. Melissa let him. She had written it, and she had written it fair, because writing it fair was the only way to keep his cooperation clean enough to survive appeal. He would learn that later. He might eventually be grateful. It did not matter to her whether he was. Han opened the door. Escort, Melissa said. Lobby, both floors. On foot. No press, no photographs. Diana walks to the elevator alone. Han inclined his head. 2 of the 4 bodyguards materialized in the doorway. Richard rose. He put one hand on the walnut to steady himself, and he took it off when he saw it had left a print. He did not look at Melissa on his way out. He did not look at Diana. He did not look at Marcus. He walked into the hall through which he had walked her, an hour and 13 minutes earlier, and he walked it now in the opposite direction, and every person on the floor was already at a monitor, pretending not to see, in the way she had been made to walk while every person had pretended not to look. The symmetry was so clean she did not smile at it. Smiling at symmetry was for people who had never needed it. Marcus rose without a hand on the table. He walked out behind Richard, Oxford's quiet on the pile. He passed Pearl and did not lift his eyes. Diana rose last. She stood a moment. Her hand went to the pocket where the pen had been. It was not there anymore. She had returned it. She had nothing to hold. She lifted her chin the way she had lifted it at 7:52, and she found there was no purchase in the air for it. She let it fall. She walked, alone as instructed, past Pearl, past Han, out into the hall. The pale green eyes did not turn. Min-jae watched them go. He did not move to Melissa. He did not touch her. He inclined his head, once, the same nod he had given her at the elevator, in reverse. Then he lifted his eyes to Nathan and, in Korean, said the shortest sentence of his morning. She has this. Nathan closed the briefcase, this time all the way, and followed him to the door. Han followed Nathan. The last bodyguard held the door open for the 3 of them, and then, with a small nod at Melissa, closed it from the outside. Pearl stayed. Melissa let her stay. She turned in the chair, slowly, because slow was what the leather asked of her, toward the panorama. The shadow of her building had crossed the plaza and was climbing the granite. In another hour, it would touch the bronze plaque above the entrance that carried Richard's grandfather's name. Tomorrow at 6 a.m., the board would learn, in a room across town, whose shadow that had been all along. She did not need to be there to know how they would sit. She lifted her hand and touched, once, the pendant with the stylized letters at her throat. Only she and the man now walking to the elevator knew what they spelled. He had chosen them the night she had told him she wanted to be paid, at work, in the currency of being seen without his name. The letters were the 4 letters of a sentence in Korean that meant, roughly, still my own. She wore them under blouses. She wore them today above one. Pearl said, from the glass, "Ms. Grant." "Yes. May I ask a question?" "You may. When did you know they would say what they said this morning?" Melissa considered. 3 weeks ago. And you came anyway. I came so it would happen where I could answer it. Pearl nodded. She was learning the shape of an answer she would use, in 20 years, at a table she had not yet been offered. Melissa saw the learning and did not name it. "Take the recess," Melissa said. "Come back at 11. Bring the binder from my drawer with the cream envelope in it. Do not open it. I will open it in front of you." Pearl said, "Yes, Ms. Grant." She left. Melissa sat alone in the room that had, since 7:52, belonged to Richard, and now belonged, on paper and in fact, to her. The walnut was warm where his palms had been. She did not wipe it. She placed her own palms flat, not to erase, but to replace. The chair held. The city held. The shadow held. She thought of the framed photograph in the cardboard box on the credenza, the pier on the eastern coast of the peninsula, 4 summers before this Tuesday, the day Min-jae had taken it without asking, because she had been laughing at something a child on the boards was doing. She had not carried the photograph out to a new desk this morning, because she had not been sure, at 7:52, which desk she would keep. She was sure now. She rose, walked to the credenza, took the photograph out of the box with 2 hands, and set it on the walnut where Richard's watch had been, then the fountain pen, then the silk scarf which she draped once across the arm of the chair and left there. She sat again. Outside, in the hall she had been marched down and marched back, 40 people were resuming a Tuesday that had become, without their consent, the first day of a company most of them would keep working for, and none of them would understand for weeks. She looked at the panorama one more time. The chestnut in her curls held the afternoon. They thought they were firing an assistant. They were kneeling, without knowing it, before the most powerful woman in the entire company. She opened the drawer at her right knee. The cream envelope was inside. 3 sentences in black ink, in a hand she knew as well as her own. She left it closed. Pearl would be back at 11, and Pearl would watch her open it, because some things, once earned, were meant to be witnessed by the person you had chosen to teach. She placed her hand flat over the envelope, the way she had placed it once, at 8:31, in a drawer 41 floors above a shadow that was hers. Tuesday, she thought, in Korean, on a Tuesday. She smiled, small, private, the smile of a woman who had, at last, been paid in the currency she had asked for. Then she pulled the chair 1 inch closer to the walnut and began, quietly, to work. If you want to watch all the stories without any ads and also get access to bonus scenes, extended epilogues, and exclusive spicy chapters, head over to our Patreon. Scan the QR code on the screen. The link is in the description or in the pinned comment. See you there. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever walked into a room where people had already decided you didn't belong and stayed standing anyway? Have you ever protected your competence from the shield of someone else's name just to be sure it was really yours? And when the truth about who you were finally landed in the room, did the people who humiliated you have the courage to look you in the eye? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, hidden power, and quiet justice, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.